Welcome to the Community Standards to Facebook. Introduction. Every day, people come to Facebook to share their stories, see the world through the eyes of others, and connect with friends and causes. The conversations that happen on Facebook reflect the diversity of a community of more than 2 billion people, communicating across countries and cultures in dozens of languages, posting everything from text to photos and videos. We recognize how important it is for Facebook to be a place where people feel empowered to communicate, and we take our role in keeping abuse off our service seriously. That's why we have developed a set of community standards that outline what is and what is not allowed on Facebook. Our standards apply around the world to all types of content. They're designed to be comprehensive. For example, content that might not be considered hate speech may still be removed for violating our bullying policies. The goal of our community standards is to encourage expression and create a safe environment. We base our policies on input from our community and from experts in fields such as technology and public safety. Our policies are also rooted in the following principles. Safety. People need to feel safe in order to build community. We are committed to removing content that encourages real-world harm, including, but not limited to, physical, financial, and emotional injury. Voice. Our mission is all about embracing diverse views. We err on the side of allowing content, even when some find it objectionable, unless removing that content can prevent a specific harm. Moreover, at times, we will allow content that might otherwise violate our standards if we feel that it is newsworthy, significant, or important to the public interest. We do this only after weighing the public interest value of the content against the risk of real-world harm. Equity. Our community is global and diverse. Our policies may seem broad, but that is because we apply them consistently and fairly to a community that transcends regions, cultures, and languages. As a result, our community standards can sometimes appear less nuanced than we would like, leading to an outcome that is at odds with their underlying purposes. For that reason, in some cases, and when we are provided with additional context, we make a decision based on the spirit rather than the letter of the policy. Everyone on Facebook plays a part in keeping the platform safe and respectful. We ask people to share responsibly and to let us know when they see something that may violate our community standards. We make it easy for people to report potentially violating content, including pages, groups, profiles, individual content, and/or comments to us for review. We also give people the option to block, unfollow, or hide people in posts so that they can control their own experience on Facebook. The consequences for violating our community standards vary depending on the severity of the violation and a person's history on the platform. For instance, we may warn someone for a first violation, but if they continue to violate our policies, we may restrict their ability to post on Facebook or disable their profile. We also may notify law enforcement when we believe there is a genuine risk of physical harm or a direct threat to public safety. Our community standards, which we will continue to develop over time, serve as a guide for how to communicate on Facebook. It is in this spirit that we ask members of the Facebook community to follow these guidelines. 1. Violence and criminal behavior. 1. Credible violence. Policy rationale. We aim to prevent potential real-world harm that may be related to content on Facebook. We understand that people commonly express disdain or disagreement by threatening or calling for violence in facetious and non-serious ways. That's why we try to consider the language, context, and details in order to distinguish casual statements from content that constitutes a credible threat to public or personal safety. In determining whether a threat is credible, we may also consider additional information like a targeted person's public visibility and vulnerability. We remove content, disable accounts, and work with law enforcement when we believe there is a genuine risk of physical harm or direct threats to public safety. Do not post the following threats. Credible statements of intent to commit violence against any person, groups of persons, or places, city or smaller. We assess credibility based upon the information available to us and generally consider these statements credible if the following are present: a target, person, group of people, or place, and a bounty, demand for payment, or mention or image of a specific weapon, or sales offers or ask to purchase weapons, or spelled out addresses, named buildings, or a target and 2 or more of the following details. Can be 2 of the same detail: the location, the timing, and the method. Any statement of intent to commit violence against a vulnerable person, identified by name, title, image, or other reference, or vulnerable group, including but not limited to heads of state, witnesses, and confidential informants, activists, and journalists. Calls for violence or statements advocating violence against the following targets, identified by their names, titles, images, or other references. Any vulnerable person or group, but not limited to heads of state, national elected officials, witnesses, and confidential informants, activists, and journalists. Public individuals, if credible, as defined above. Groups of people or unnamed specific persons, if credible. Places, if credible. Where no target is specified, but a symbol representing the target or a visual of weapons is included. Aspirational and conditional statements of violence against any vulnerable groups, public individuals, if credible, unless the individual is convicted of certain crimes or is a member of a dangerous organization. Vulnerable persons, if credible. Groups of people or unnamed specific persons, if credible. Places, if credible. Any content created for the express purpose of outing an individual as a member of a designated and recognizable at-risk group. Instructions on how to make or use weapons if the goal is to injure or kill people, as may be evident from. As evident from language explicitly stating that goal, or as evident from imagery that shows or stimulates the end result, serious injury or death, as part of the instruction. Unless there is clear context that the content is for an alternative purpose, for example, shared as part of the recreational self-defense activities or training by a country's military, a commercial video, games, or news coverage. The instructions on how to make or use explosives, unless there is clear context that the content is for a nonviolent purpose. For example, clear scientific or educational purpose of use or fireworks. Exposure of vulnerable individuals' identities without their permission. Any content containing statements of intent, calls for action, or advocating for violence due to the outcome of an election. Section 2. Dangerous individuals and organizations. Policy rationale. In an effort to prevent and disrupt real-world harm, we do not allow any organization or individuals that are engaged in the following to have a presence on Facebook. Terrorist activity, organized hate, mass or serial murder, human trafficking, organized violence, or criminal activity. We also remove content that expresses support or praise for groups, leaders, or individuals who are involved in these activities. We do not allow the following people, living or deceased, or groups to maintain presence. For example, have an account, page, group on our platform. Terrorist organizations and terrorists. A terrorist organization is defined as any non-governmental non-governmental organization that engages in premeditated acts of violence against persons or property to intimidate a civilian population, government, or international organization in order to achieve a political, religious, or ideological aim. A member of a terrorist organization or any person who commits a terrorist act is considered a terrorist. The Terrorist Act is defined as the premeditated act of violence against persons or property carried out by a non-government actor to intimidate a civilian population, government, or international organization in order to achieve a political, religious, or ideological aim. Hate organizations and their leaders and prominent members. The hate organization is defined as any organization of 3 or more people that is organized under a name, sign, or symbol that has an ideology, statements, or physical actions that attack individuals based on characteristics including race, religious affiliation, nationality, ethnicity, gender, sex, sexual orientation, serious disease, or disability. Mass and serial murderers. We consider a homicide to be a mass murder if it results in 4 or more deaths in one incident. We consider any individual who has committed 2 or more murders over multiple incidents or locations a serial murderer. We make these assessments based upon the information available to us, and we will generally apply this policy to a mass or serial murderer who meets any of the following criteria. They were convicted of mass or serial murder. They were killed by law enforcement during commission of the mass or serial murder or during subsequent flight. They killed themselves at the scene or in the aftermath of the mass or serial murder. They were identified by law enforcement with images from the crime. Human trafficking groups and their leaders. Human trafficking groups are organizations responsible for any of the following: the prostitution of others, forced or bonded labor, slavery or the removal of organs, recruiting, transporting, transferring, detaining, providing, harboring, or receiving a minor or adult against their will. Criminal organizations and their leaders and prominent members. A criminal organization is defined as any association of 3 or more people that is united under a name, color, hand gesture, or recognized, that has engaged in or threatens to engage in criminal activity. including, but not limited to, homicide, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, identity theft, money laundering, extortion or trafficking, assault, kidnapping, sexual exploitation, which is covered in Section 7 and Section 8. We do not allow symbols that represent any of the above organizations or individuals to be shared on our platform without context that condemns or neutrally discusses the content. We do not allow content that praises any of the above organizations or individuals that of any acts committed by them. We do not allow coordination of support for any of the above organizations or individuals or any acts committed by them. Section 3. Promoting or publicizing crime. Policy rationale. We prohibit people from promoting or publicizing violent crime, theft, and or fraud because we do not want to condone this activity. And because there is a risk of copycat behavior, we do not allow people to depict criminal activity or admit to crimes they or their associates have committed. We do, however, allow people to debate or advocate for the legality of criminal activities, as well as address them in a rhetorical or satirical way. Do not post content depicting, admitting, or promoting the following criminal acts committed by you or your associates. Acts of physical harm committed against people. Acts of physical harm committed against animals, except in cases of hunting, fishing, religious sacrifice, or food preparation and processing. Poaching, or selling endangered species or their parts. Staged animals versus animal fights. Theft. Vandalism or property damage. Fraud. Trafficking as referenced in Section 2. Or sexual violence and sexual exploitation, including sexual assault, as referenced in Section 7 and Section 8. Section 4, Coordinating Harm. Policy rationale. In an effort to prevent and disrupt real-world harm, we prohibit people from facilitating or coordinating future criminal activity that is intended or likely to cause harm to people, businesses, or animals. People can draw attention to harmful activity that they may witness or experience as long as they do not advocate or for coordinating the harm. Do not post statements of intent, calls to action, or advocation to the following: acts of physical harm committed against people. Acts of physical harm committed against animals, except in cases of hunting, fishing, religious sacrifice, or food preparation or processing. Poaching or selling endangered species and their parts. Staged animal versus animal fights. Theft. Vandalism, property damage. Fraud. Trafficking, as referenced in Section 2. Sexual violence or sexual exploitation, including the sexual assaults as referenced in Section 7 and Section 8. Offers or services to smuggle or assist in the smuggling of people. Section 5, regulated goods. Policy rationale. To encourage safety and compliance with common legal restrictions, we prohibit attempts by individuals, manufacturers, and retailers to purchase, sell, or trade non-medical drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, and marijuana. We also prohibit the purchase, sale, gifting, exchange, and transfer of firearms, including firearm parts or ammunition, between private individuals on Facebook. Some of these items are not regulated everywhere. However, because of the borderless nature of our community, we try to enforce our policies as consistently as possible. Firearm stores and online retailers may promote items available for sale off of our services as long as those retailers comply with all applicable laws and regulations. We allow discussions about sales of firearms and firearm parts in stores or by online retailers and advocating for changes to firearm regulation. Regulated goods that are not prohibited by our community standards may be subject to our more stringent commerce policies. Do not post content about non-medical drugs other than alcohol or tobacco that coordinates or encourages others to sell non-medical drugs, depicts, admits to, or promotes sales of non-medical drugs by the poster of the content or their associates. Promotes, encourages, coordinates, or provides instructions for use of non-medical drugs. admits, either in writing or verbally, to personal use of non-medical drugs unless posted in a recovery context. Content that depicts the sale or attempts to purchase marijuana and pharmaceutical drugs. This includes the content that mentions or depicts marijuana or pharmaceutical drugs, makes an attempt to sell or trade, by which we mean any of the following: explicitly mentioning the product is for sale or trade, asking the audience to buy, listing the price, encouraging contact about the product, either by explicitly asking to be contacted or including any type of contact information, attempting to solicit the product, defined as stating an interest in buying the product, or asking if anyone has the product for sale, trade. This applies to the both individual pieces of content and pages for the groups primarily dedicated to the sale or marijuana or pharmaceutical drugs. Content that attempts to sell, gift, exchange, or transfer firearms, firearm parts, ammunition, or explosives between private individuals. This includes content that mentions or depicts firearms, firearm parts, ammunition, or explosives, and a product unrelated to firearms, and makes an attempt to sell or transfer, including any of the following, unless posted by an entity representing a brick and mortar store, legitimate website, or brand. Explicitly mentioning the product is for sale or trade, asking the audience to buy, listing the price or noting that the product is free, encouraging contact about the product, either by explicitly asking to be contacted, including any type of contact information, and making an attempt to solicit the item for sale, defined as stating that they are interested in buying the good, or asking if anyone else has the goods for sale or trade. For the following content, we restrict visibility to adults 21 years of age and older. Content posted by a brick and mortar store, legitimate website, or brand which coordinates or promotes the sale or transfer of firearms, firearms parts, ammunition, or explosives. This includes content that explicitly mentions the product is for sale or transfer and asks the audience to buy the product, or lists the price or notes that the product is free, or encourages contact about the product either by explicitly asking or to be contacted, including any type of contact information. Break. Do you want to go on the adventure of a lifetime? Go to www.stormnavigator.biz and sign up for the Storm Adventure Seminar. Limited seating is available. End break. Section 6. Policy Rationale. In an effort to promote a safe environment on Facebook, we remove content that encourages suicide or self-injury, including real-time depictions that might lead others to engage in similar behavior. Self-injury is defined as the intentional and direct injuring of the body, including self-mutilation and eating disorders. We want Facebook to be a space where people can share their experiences, raise awareness about these issues, and support each other through difficult experiences. And so, we allow people to discuss suicide and self-injury. We encourage people to offer and to seek support from one another in connection with these difficult topics. We work with organizations around the world to provide assistance to people in distress. We also talk with the experts in suicide and self-injury to help inform our policies and enforcements. For example, we have been advised by experts that we should not remove live videos of self-harm while there is an opportunity for loved ones and authorities to provide help or resources. We remove any content that identifies and negatively targets victims or survivors of self-injury or suicide seriously, humorously, or rhetorically. People can, however, share information about self-injury and suicide to draw attention to the issue and allow for discussion, so as long as they do not promote or encourage self-injury or suicide. Learn more about suicide and self-injury policies and the resources they provide by searching for Facebook suicide and self-injury policies. Do not post content that promotes, encourages, coordinates, or provides instructions for suicide, self-injury, eating disorders, content about self-injury that contains promotional slogans without clear anti-self-injury disclaimers. Except in limited situations of newsworthiness, it is against our policies to post content depicting a person who engaged in a suicide attempt or death by suicide. For the following content, we include a warning screen so that people are aware the content may be disturbing. Photos or videos depicting a person's death by suicide that are determined to be newsworthy. Photos or videos depicting a person who engaged in euthanasia, assisted suicide in a medical setting. We provide resources to people who post written or verbal admissions of engagement in self-injury, including suicide, euthanasia and assisted suicide, self-mutilation, eating disorders, images where more than one cut of self-mutilation is present on a body part, and the primary subject of the image is one or more unhealed cuts. Section 7. Child nudity and sexual exploitation of children. Policy rationale. We do not allow content that sexually exploits or endangers children. When we become aware of apparent child exploitation, we report it to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. In compliance with applicable law, we know that sometimes people share nude images of their own children with good intentions. However, we generally remove these images because of the potential for abuse by others and to avoid the possibility of other people reusing or misappropriating the images. Facebook Safety Advisory Board to discuss and improve our policies and enforcement around online safety issues, especially with regard to children. Do not post content that depicts participation in or advocates for the sexual exploitation of children, including, but not limited to, engaging in any sexual activity involving minors, soliciting, displaying, sharing, or viewing imagery of nude, sexualized, or sexual activity with minors, arranging real-world sexual encounters or obtaining sexual material from a minor directly, adults soliciting minors, minors soliciting minors, displaying nudity to minors, minors soliciting adults, using our products and site functionality with the intention of sexualizing minors. Content including photos, videos, real-world art, digital content, and text that depicts any sexual activity involving minors. Minors in a sexual fetish context. Minors with sexual elements, but not limited to, restraints, focus on genitals, presence of aroused adult, presence of sex toys, sexualized costume, stripping, staged environment, for example, on a bed or professionally shot, quality, focus, angles. Open mouth kissing with a minor or an adult. Content including photos, videos, real-world art, digital content, and verbal depictions that show minors in a sexualized context. Content that depicts child nudity, where nudity is defined as visible genitalia, even when covered or obscured by transparent clothing, visible anus and or fully nude close-up of buttocks, uncovered female nipples for children older than toddler age, no clothes present from neck to knee for children other than toddler, digitally created depictions of nude minors unless the image is for health or educational purposes. Section 8. Sexual exploitation of adults. Policy rationale. We recognize the importance of Facebook as a place to discuss and draw attention to sexual violence, and exploitation. We believe this is an important part of building common understanding and community. In an effort to create space for this conversation, while promoting a safe environment, we remove content that depicts, threatens, or promotes sexual violence, sexual assault, or sexual exploitation. While also allowing space for victims to share their experiences. We remove content that displays, advocates for, or coordinates sexual acts with non-consenting parties or commercial sexual services. We do this to avoid facilitating transactions that may involve trafficking, coercion, and non-consensual sex acts. Sexual services include prostitution, escort services, sexual massages, and filmed sexual activity. To protect victims and survivors, we also remove images that depict incidents of sexual violence and intimate images shared without permission from the people pictured. For additional information on these efforts, please visit Using Technology to Protect Intimate Images and Help Build a Safe Community, as well as our guide to reporting and removing intimate images shared without your consent. Do not post content, including photos, videos, digital content, and verbal depictions that shows or advocates for any form of crushing, necrophilia, bestiality, or non-consensual touching. Content that attempts to exploit people by any of the following: coercing money, favors, or illicit images from people by threats of exposure of their naked or semi-naked photos, videos. Sharing imagery that fulfills all three of the following conditions. The image is non-commercial or produced in a private setting. The person in the image is nude, engaged in sexual activity, or in a sexual pose. Lack of consent to share the image is indicated by vengeful context, for example, caption, comments, or paged title. Independent sources, for example, media coverage or law enforcement record. A visible match between the person depicted in the image and the person who has reported the content to us. The person who reported the content to us. The person who reported the content to us shares the same name as the person depicted as the image. Sharing imagery where the focal point is the crotch, chest, buttocks, or up skirt in either. The person in the image is apparently not aware that the image is being taken. It would be impossible to determine whether the person is aware. Threatening or stating an intent to share intimate imagery without consent. Soliciting intimate imagery to view or share without consent. Attempts to coordinate adult sexual services or engaging in sexual solicitation, including, but not limited to, escort services, prostitution, filmed sexual encounters, sexualized image, sexualized massages, requesting rates on images of escorts, offering contact information with escort images or sexual solicitation slang terms, arranged marriages with refugees or internally displaced persons, paid domination service, offering or soliciting sex or sexual fetish partners. Section 9, bullying. Policy rationale. Bullying happens in many places and comes in many forms. From making statements degrading someone's character, to posting inappropriate images, to threatening someone. We do not tolerate bullying on Facebook because we want the members of our community to feel safe and respected. We will remove content that purposefully targets private individuals with the intention of degrading or shaming them. We recognize that bullying can be especially harmful to minors, and our policies provide heightened protection for minors because they are more vulnerable and susceptible to online bullying. In certain instances, we require the individual who is the target of bullying to report the content to us before removing it. Our bullying policies do not apply to public figures because we want to allow discourse, which often includes critical discussion of people who are featured in the news or have a large public audience. Discussion of public figures, nonetheless, must comply with our community standards, and we will remove content about public figures that violates other policies, including hate speech or credible threats. Our Bullying Prevention Hub is a resource for teens, parents, and educators seeking support for issues related to bullying and other conflicts. It offers step-by-step guidance, including on how to start important conversations for people being bullied, parents who have a child being bullied or accused of bullying, and educators who have students involved with bullying. Do not post content about another private individual that reflects claims about sexual activity, degrading physical descriptions about or ranking individuals on physical appearance or personality, threats of non-consensual sexual touching, sexualized text targeting another individual, an individual in a context that is intended to degrade, for example, menstruating, urinating, vomiting, defecating. Physical bullying where the context further degrades the individual. Comparison to animals that are culturally perceived as intellectually or physically inferior or to an inanimate object. Content that has been photoshopped to target and to demean an individual, including by highlighting specific physical characteristics or threatening violence in the text or with imagery. Content that specifies an individual as the target of statements of intent to commit violence, calls for action of violence, statements advocating violence, aspirational and conditional statements of violence. Physical bullying. In addition, we may remove pages or groups that are dedicated to attacking individuals by, for example, cursing at individuals or individual, making negative character claims, making negative ability claims. We also remove content that is targeted at minors when it contains cursing, claims about romantic involvement or sexual orientation, allegations about criminal or illegal behavior, coordinating, advocating, or promoting exclusion, negative character claims, negative ability claims, negative physical description, expressions of contempt or disgust, calls for death or serious disease or disability, videos of physical bullying or violence against minors in a fight context, shared with no caption or a neutral or praising caption. 10. Harassment. Policy rationale. We do not tolerate harassment on Facebook. We want people to feel safe, to engage and connect with their community. Our harassment policy applies to both public and private individuals because we want to prevent unwanted or malicious contact on the platform. Context and intent matter, and we allow people to share and reshare posts if it is clear that something was shared in order to condemn or draw attention to harassment. In addition to reporting such behavior and content, we encourage people to use tools available on Facebook to help prevent it. Do not repeatedly contact a single person despite that person's clear desire and action to prevent that contact. Repeatedly contact large numbers of people with no prior solicitation. Send messages to any individual that contain cursing aimed at an individual or group of individuals in the thread, cause for death, serious disease or disability, or physical harm aimed at an individual or group of individuals in the thread. Bullying policy violations. Claims that a victim of a violent tragedy is lying about being a victim. Pretending to be a victim of a verified event, or otherwise is paid or employed to mislead people about their role in the event when sent directly to a survivor and or immediate family member of a survivor or victim. Send messages to a group that contain any bullying policy violations, regardless of whether the person being targeted is a public or private individual. Target anyone maliciously, including public figures, by attacking them based on their status as a victim of sexual assault or sexual exploitation, threatening any participant in public discourse with violence or an attempt to intimidate or silence them, calling for self-injury or suicide of a specific person or group of people. Target victims or survivors of violent tragedies by name or image with claims that they are lying about being a victim of an event, acting, pretending to be the victim of an event, or otherwise paid or employed to mislead people about their role in the event. 11. Privacy violations and image privacy rights. Policy rationale. Privacy and the protection of personal information are fundamentally important values for Facebook. We work hard to keep your account secure and safeguard your personal information in order to protect you from potential physical or financial harm. You should not post personal or confidential information about others without first getting their consent. We also provide ways to report imagery that they believe to be in violation of their privacy rights. Do not post content that facilitates identity theft by posting or soliciting personally identifiable information, including, but not limited to, national identification numbers, social security numbers, passport numbers or exam numbers, government IDs, school and education IDs, featuring two of the following. 1, name. 2, photo. Or 3, ID number. Digital identities, including passwords, medical, psychological, biometric, or genetic details. Content that facilitates identity theft by sharing personally identifiable information via an external link. Content that facilitates identity theft by sharing private financial information of an organization or business. Content that facilitates identity theft by disclosing the following personal financial information, either of the self or others: bank account and or card information, financial records paired with account information. Content that facilitates identity theft by sharing the private contact information of others, defined as private phone numbers or addresses, email, messenger, and chat identities. The above information may be shared to promote charitable causes, non-violating services, or to facilitate finding missing people or animals. Except in limited cases of newsworthiness, content claimed or confirmed to come from a hacked source, regardless of whether the affected person is a public figure or a private individual. Content that identifies individuals by name and depicts their personal information, including driver's licenses, government IDs, other than driver's licenses, green cards, or immigration papers, marriage, birth, and name change certificates, digital identities, including passwords, license plates. Content that includes photographs will display the external view of the private residences if the following conditions apply. The residence is a single-family home, or the residence unit number is identified in the image caption, the city or the neighborhood is identified, a resident is mentioned or depicted. That same resident objects to the exposure of their private residence. Content that exposes the undercover status of law enforcement personnel, if the content contains the agent's full name or other explicit identification and explicitly mentions their undercover status, or the content contains images identifying the faces of the law enforcement personnel and explicitly mentions their undercover status. Content that exposes information about safe houses by sharing any of the information below, unless the safe house is actively promoting its location, contact information, or the type of service and protection it offers through comments, posts, pages, or groups. Actual address of the safe house. Post box only is allowed. Images of the safe house. Identifiable city, neighborhood of the safe house, or information outing residents of the safe house. The following content may also be removed. A reported photo or video of people where the person depicted in the image is a minor under 13 years old and the content was reported by the minor or a parent or legal guardian. A minor between 13 and 18 years old and the content was reported by the minor. An adult where the content was reported by the adult from outside the United States and applicable law may provide rights to removal. Any person who is incapacitated and unable to report the content on their own.